Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Rob Valenti, and tonight we're talking about whether or not All Elite Wrestling is forcing change in the WWE. But before we get to the conversation, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications as we're trying to hit 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling Double or Nothing. And Ralph, we're actually at the halfway point of our goal for Double or Nothing. We just reached 2,500 subscribers as we're recording this. But, you know, everybody's talking about All Elite Wrestling, and there's been a lot of changes in WWE, especially on screen. Ralph, do you think All Elite Wrestling has something to do with this?
I think it has a little bit to do with All Elite Wrestling putting a little bit of pressure on WWE. Obviously, they haven't had any shows yet, so once they start having shows and then supposedly we'll see the TV deal come to fruition or be announced, and I think that will add a little more pressure to WWE. But it is something that I think WWE is paying close attention to. So I think that they're adding a little bit of pressure to WWE to make changes, but I think it's not only AEW, more and more the independent scene as a whole. And just the fact that, you know, aside from this past week, Raw and Smackdown, we have seen a decline in interest within Raw and Smackdown. So I think it's a combination of all of those things going on as to why WWE is looking to make some specific changes.
Now, there are a lot of guys that have either requested their release or are rumored to have requested their release. And because of this, or people want to speculate because of this, they're getting pushes. Some examples, we see the Usos and we see the Revival winning the tag team championships. And this is a big problem with WWE, is their tag team divisions or lack thereof. Do you see this as All Elite Wrestling as one of their big things being the tag team division, that they're trying to push, that Vince is seeing this and now is starting to bring tag team wrestling more to the forefront in WWE?
Yeah. Well, I guess if you believe all of the internet rumors that have been circulating around, obviously we know, or we believe, the Revival did ask for their release. We're not really sure about the Usos and what their kind of contractual situation is, and we've heard rumors that they're upset, that they also want to leave. And it's just really because they feel like they've been misused and that they really haven't been used properly, and that they feel like AEW is going to be a little more committed to the tag team division specifically. And we know that because the Young Bucks flat out came out and said, you know, why can't the tag team division be the main event? And obviously you have the Young Bucks, who is, if not the top tag team in the world, one of the very best. You've already got the Lucha Brothers, who are there as well. You've got Best Friends, who we know are going to be working with them in some sort of capacity. So if they can manage to get somebody like the Usos or, you know, even the Revival, that would be a good thing for them. But it's certainly encouraging to see that All Elite Wrestling is going to be committed to promoting or pushing the tag team division, because that's something that the WWE hasn't done in years. They've done it a little bit where they've kind of highlighted a team like The Bar. Obviously, the Usos and the New Day, they've had prominent roles throughout WWE, but it's really kind of peaks and valleys, ups and downs, and it's not so much consistent. So if you're looking for consistency, or I should say if the tag teams like the Usos or the Revival are looking for consistency and opportunity, it seems like AEW is willing to offer that to tag teams specifically, whereas WWE will offer that at times when it's kind of convenient for them, but kind of lose track of that division from time to time, unfortunately.
Now, we are definitely seeing a push in the tag team division, Ralph, but at the same time, some other guys that are rumored to be leaving after their contract expires, or as WWE confirmed it, Dean Ambrose, and we're seeing I guess, on-screen burial, but at the same time, there are some things that are very interesting with his character right now, and I think people want to see more of what Dean Ambrose brings to the table, but he is losing week after week, so it's kind of weird what they're doing with Ambrose as he is leaving WWE. So is this where WWE are kind of trying to lower his stock as he's leaving, or is this more kind of the story that might be seeing come to fruition, where Dean Ambrose might be actually making a story out of this?
Yeah. So first and foremost, we don't necessarily know if Dean Ambrose is actually trying to leave WWE. There's been rumors that he did ask for his release and that he wanted to leave, and he had, well, not that he asked for his release, but he intended to leave and not resign with the company because he was upset with the direction of his character. And then not too long after that, it was reported that that wasn't actually true, that it's essentially a part of a storyline that he helped create, and that it's something that he's going to use to kind of catapult himself into the main event status, I guess you would say. So that's kind of still up for speculation and kind of choosing what you want to believe. But I mean, at the very least, what we've been talking about all along is that AEW is going to be an alternative, and for some of these guys that feel like they've been underutilized, and you can use a whole list of people as an example, Dean Ambrose being one, Ty Dillinger, obviously we're going to talk about him, even somebody like a Dolph Ziggler, or even if you look at Neville I think is a really good example. AEW is going to give these guys the stage to really kind of show what they can do. If you look at Neville specifically, he was kind of pigeonholed as being this almost like superhero type character. And he's now this very dark character. He's got a dark side. He's got an edge to him. And frankly, I think his stock has risen significantly ever since he left WWE and done things outside of WWE, whether it's been Dragon Gate or on the UK independent scene, or what he's going to do in AEW. So I think it's encouraging to see that these guys, even though everyone would assume WWE at some point, if you make it there, you've kind of hit the big time. You can make a name for yourself outside of WWE like Neville has, or even like Cody Rhodes has. I think it's impressive to see that Cody Rhodes not too long ago was Stardust, and now he's one of the most sought after individuals within the wrestling industry.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you there, where even within the last couple of years, it was WWE was the pinnacle, the major leagues, the be all end all in the professional wrestling career. But now we see guys like Cody Rhodes and Pac and the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega who are able to have a very successful and lucrative career outside of WWE. And I think some guys are seeing that, and the ones that, may be frustrated with how they're booked, but would have stayed because they wouldn't have gotten a better contract, are now seeing the grass greener on the other side. And two guys that we know for sure asked for their release, and it seems like they are going to leave WWE. One is Hideo Itami, which happened a few weeks back. But then recently, a couple days ago, we saw that Ty Dillinger didn't even let the news break by some dirt sheet or news reporter or Meltzer or WWE doing a statement. He actually just went on Twitter and said that he is going to leave, or he wants to leave. How big is this that someone like Dillinger wants to leave? And I mean, this is a guy that since he's been called up in 2017 was basically irrelevant for his entire run on the main roster in WWE, Ralph.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to kind of keep the history of professional wrestling in context, because I think it kind of shows you that, ever since the fall of WCW, WWE has been kind of fortunate that these guys, or anybody that left the company really, didn't have a place to go where they can really kind of highlight what they were capable of. So we do know one way or another that over the past, I would probably imagine 5 years, that there's been kind of a decline in the interest in WWE across the board. That's evident kind of in merchandise sales. It's evident in the ratings on TV. So if you look back to like right before the Monday Night Wars, you had a lot of big name guys like Hall and Nash, just to name a few, going back and forth. So those were established guys going back and forth between WWE and WCW. Then once WCW fell, I guess the next thing closest to WWE, or the second place thing, would have been TNA. Now, I think the biggest knock on TNA was, and their strategy was, let's just sign as many former WWE or WCW established guys as possible, and try to gain popularity that way.
Now, piggybacking off of that, Ralph, AEW, it seems like anytime there's a rumor of someone from WWE that wants to leave or is going to leave when his contract expires, automatically it's, oh, he's going to AEW, or AEW's interested in this guy. And I mean, we're even talking about guys like Brock Lesnar saying that they're going to talk with All Elite Wrestling. Is a lot of this just wishful thinking by the fans that they want to see some of these big names in WWE just because that's what AEW needs to become successful early? Or do you think there's some, does some of this hold water?
I think some of it holds water, and I think some of it is wishful thinking. So the point I was going to make is, while WCW was kind of committed to stealing a lot of top talent from WWE at the time, and while TNA was kind of committed to just signing as many big name guys as possible, AEW is trying to build their foundation based on the independent scene. And I think that's smart on their behalf, because as you've seen, there's been a kind of a disinterest in the WWE, and they have a lot of talent on their roster, right? So they've always had a good roster. They've always been able to attract the biggest name stars, the best wrestlers in the world. But I think what you've seen is, over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years, you've seen where fans have become a little frustrated with the product because they feel like there's certain wrestlers that are underutilized. And now that AEW is becoming more prominent, and there's a much larger interest in the independent scene, as well as, like Ring of Honor, obviously, and the resurgence, I should say, of New Japan Pro Wrestling, they can't really afford to let certain guys go. Because, again, if you look at Pac, if you look at Cody Rhodes, and you look at some of these guys that have left WWE, they've been able to make it just fine. Chris Jericho is another example. He was kind of doing his thing in WWE. He was probably at that upper mid-card level. Everybody probably assumed that he would stay with WWE until he retired, but now he's one of the biggest names in wrestling right now, and that's all happening outside of the WWE. So I think right now what you're seeing is, in comparison to where some of the bigger name guys would jump from brand to brand or sign with like TNA, you're seeing now where some of these guys who feel like they're underutilized in WWE have an opportunity to go elsewhere. And WWE, I think, should be a little nervous about that, especially for guys like Dean Ambrose, maybe Ty Dillinger, a guy like Pac. I think they'll be just as successful outside of WWE.
Now, I mean, you can say that they'll be more successful in WWE for some of these guys. Like Dillinger, we know, has really done nothing, as I already mentioned, since he got called up to the main roster. And even his NXT run wasn't a memorable one. It was a good run, but you could name 10 or 15 guys that have had better runs in NXT. So that gets me to think, like, as much as people like Dillinger, know he can have a good match, he's a good character, maybe it's just that WWE sees something and is like, you know what, maybe this guy isn't a draw that he might think he is. And
I mean, it's certainly possible, but I think on the other hand, you also have to consider that, WWE is very much geared towards a very specific demographic, obviously. And they're much more of kind of like a brand, right? They're huge.
Right.
So,
but All Elite Wrestling and New Japan and Ring of Honor, they have to be this brand. They're not going to be as big as WWE, but All Elite Wrestling, for example, they need to be a brand to at least attract a good TV deal. If people are talking about TBS and TNT, they're not going to put some wrestling company that's only going to bring in 500,000 viewers a week. They need something as close to 1 or even 2 million per week for this to even be, a quote unquote war.
I'm certainly not saying we're at that point yet. I'm just saying that there's promise, and that you can see that based on obviously the success that they had. Obviously, it wasn't all Elite Wrestling, but they had success with All In. They were able to sell out Double or Nothing, about 12,000 seats. Not only that, but they said that they had something like 40,000 people waiting in the queue to purchase tickets. So I get the sense that this is more of a movement, and their foundation is professional wrestling, right? So they're going to try and reignite the excitement with that is pro wrestling. Now, are they going to be successful in that? They could be. They could fail. We don't know what's going to happen. But the key thing is, like they've been saying all along, they want to be an alternative. So a good comparison I think we can make is you don't know what somebody's really capable of unless you give them the opportunity to do this, right? So WWE, they're very much focused on a very specific demographic, like I was saying before. So maybe Ty Dillinger has some type of character, has something within him that he can't really tap into because WWE doesn't allow him to do that. So an example of that is look at Stone Cold Steve Austin. Who was he before in WCW? He was the Hollywood Blondes, which was a very successful tag team, but then he was given the opportunity to go to WWE, a completely different environment, and he became Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that's happened with other people too. You know, Triple H, obviously, he was in WCW, he came over to WWE, he came over as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, and then he became Triple H. You know, so there's multiple examples of that. Just because somebody wasn't able to get over in WWE doesn't mean they can't be successful in another company if they're given the opportunity. Again, look at Cody Rhodes. He was Stardust several years ago. I think probably most people thought he was like a mid-card level guy, and now he's one of the hottest guys within the wrestling industry, and he's the American Nightmare, and he totally reinvented himself. So, you know, I think if nothing else, AEW at least gives specific wrestlers or certain wrestlers the opportunity to kind of show what they're made of, which is ultimately best for the business.
Now let's bring up the opportunities. Now, a lot of people for the last few years have said that their favorites have not gotten the opportunity. They're not pushed like the way they should be. And it's fair to say with some guys, but recently we are starting to see some of the fan favorites get the push, and WWE might finally be listening to their audience. For example, we got Becky Lynch, who, you know, no matter if she's on the show or not, people are chanting her name. You also have Finn Balor winning the Intercontinental Championship, something that people have been wanting for a long time, to have a belt on Finn Balor. And of course, everything going on with Kofi Kingston. So is this a product of WWE finally listening to their audience, or is it, oh, you know what? Let's throw a bone out there for these guys just to shut them up for a while until we get what we want at WrestleMania?
I mean, it's tough. It's tough to say. You want to think that, yes, they're actually going to be committed to legitimately changing. And one of the things we told people right out of the get-go was have patience with this. It's not going to change overnight. So I want to hope that they're committed to, you know, pushing a guy like Kofi Kingston because he's been there so long. Now, it's also going to be up to Kofi Kingston to make sure he remains relevant. You know, he's going to have to cut some good promos. He's going to have to do certain things to make himself stand out, because if he doesn't do that, I think people will just lose interest, you know. So there's that. I mean, it's certainly encouraging to see them push the tag team, like, obviously,
the revival of the Usos.
The revival of the Usos. We have the women's tag team division now, which hopefully that starts to take off. But you know what? And the same token, on the other side of things, you still see WWE kind of slipping into their own old ways. So, you know, Asuka hasn't really been kind of on TV for quite some time. I know she was on SmackDown this past week, but before that, she was kind of just an afterthought. We saw them for a couple of weeks. It looked like they were going to do something with Mojo Rawley, and you know nothing really came of that. So as much as they're trying to push for this change, it's kind of like they're still kind of stuck in their old ways of losing sight of storylines and not being consistent, which to me was always the thing that drove me the most crazy about WWE programming.
Now, we did see some fresh faces on these past Raws and SmackDown. We saw 4 new faces from NXT: Aleister Black, Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, and Ricochet. And it seems like whatever Vince McMahon had in mind worked as far as a ratings concerned. Raw went up in the ratings 13% from last week, and SmackDown had their highest rating since November of 2018. Yep. Do you see that Vince might actually see this as, hey, these guys are actually going to draw, and we're finally going to start pushing the young guys and stop worrying about relying on a John Cena or a Brock Lesnar or, you know, some of these part-timers that come and go as they please and aren't really focused on being with WWE full-time?
Again, it's tough to say. I want to hope so. But at the same time, when you look at WWE's roster, it's still so bloated. You know, we haven't had Sami Zayn come back yet. We know Kevin Owens is going to come back. Bray Wyatt hasn't come back. So there's 3 guys right there that there's only so much time that you're going to be able to dedicate to these guys. Then you add these 4 guys that you want to push on top of the other NXT call-ups that have been brought up, like EC3, who mysteriously has disappeared. Who knows what the hell's going on with Lars Sullivan? Do I want to see them get pushed? Yes, but at the same time, I'm being realistic. In order to push them, they're going to have to be given the opportunity to. And I just think that WWE's roster is way too bloated. They're going to have to trim the fat, so to speak, if they want to kind of give these guys the proper push and the time to invest in their characters and stuff. And I don't know if they're really going to be committed to that.
And I think also with you're bringing up the bloated roster, and I think this is also how All Elite Wrestling can force WWE to change, because WWE has their bloated roster, and some of these guys that aren't on TV as much as they should or want to be on, they might go and say, hey, you know what, I want to be released, I'm not going to renew my contract, let the rest of the contract go and not re-sign. And then this ends up, WWE kind of fixes its own problem with a bloated roster, that these guys will leave, and it's not going to be the guys that they're really heavily dependent on, like Seth Rollins and AJ Styles. And
I think it's pretty obvious that, NXT has a pretty loaded roster as well. But the good thing about NXT is they manage to either produce weekly content, or their takeovers are done in a way where they're able to highlight these guys and keep people interested. Whereas, WWE Monday Night Raw or SmackDown, where they have much more time television-wise, for whatever reason, people lose interest. Even with the NXT guys being on Monday Night Raw, I mean, I don't know what was going on with that crowd on Monday night, and I know it drew criticism all over Twitter and from everybody, from people within the industry and just fans. But
it was a really bad crowd.
I think Steve Austin or The Undertaker could have walked out that night, and the crowd would have been quiet. I don't know what was
if
going on.
CM Punk returned that night, the crowd would have been dead.
Nothing was working. Nothing. So it's unfortunate that all those guys kind of made their debuts at that point and didn't really get the reaction that I felt like they should have or deserved. But you know what? That'll all kind of be forgotten, because I think that, if it's encouraging to see what they've done with them over the course of the past couple nights. So you saw, like, for example, DYI, they obviously had the win over the Revival, and then the next night they had the win over the Bar. So that's certainly encouraging. That looks like they're going to go all in on Aleister Black, which should be pretty cool. And
Ricochet looked probably the best out of all 4 of them on both nights.
He definitely did, but again, let's see what happens over time, because again, they've called up guys. They had those video packages for weeks, months, I think. EC3, where's he gone? He had the win over Dean Ambrose, then he had a loss over Dean Ambrose, and unless I missed it, I didn't see him on Monday Night Raw this past week.
I didn't see him either.
Sure.
I know, and again, everything with Lars Sullivan, he's disappeared. But then you have Heavy Machinery, who's been on TV almost every week since they've first appeared, and they've been on Raw, they've been on SmackDown, they've had some good runs. They haven't won a big match yet, but they've won. But they had Fatal 4-Ways to determine number 1 contenders. They didn't win those, but looked good in those matches. Lacey Evans, I don't know what's going on with these Lacey Evans walking out and then walking backstage. And apparently the rumor is with her is that she's going to be facing Asuka at WrestleMania.
Okay.
I don't know. Well, seeing that Asuka hasn't been on TV that much, I know she, like you said, she was on SmackDown this week, lost to Mandy Rose. So I don't know what's going on, but Meltzer's saying that Lacey Evans could be one of the top females when Ronda Rousey leaves in the division. I personally don't see it yet with Lacey Evans, and it's only because there's not much to see from her. There's not much of a sample size yet with her. I'd like to actually see her in a match. I'd like to see her cut a promo. It's been very limited, and to say that she's going to be the top female is a little worrisome.
Yeah.
For now.
So I think it's a little premature, but going back to the point about Asuka, I mean, it's just this is the stuff that will drive me crazy about WWE, because it's kind of like, okay, well, you had her beat, whether Ronda got involved or not, you had her beat Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair for the women's title. And then you had her go on and tap out Becky Lynch and defend her title. And then you keep her off TV for like 2 or 3 weeks, don't have her in a match on the most recent pay-per-view. And it's just like, for what reason? And then she loses to Mandy Rose. I don't get it. These are the things that will drive me crazy about WWE. But
and this is the stuff that people are already assuming that All Elite Wrestling will be able to fill the holes with. Like, they know how to book everything instantly before even having a show. And people are going to say, well, they had All In. All In was not an All Elite Wrestling show. It was, yes, Cody and the Bucks put it together, but essentially it was a Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Impact Wrestling super show that the Young Bucks and Cody put together. Now, it's good to be able to book one show, and they did an amazing job, but to do it on a weekly basis is very, very hard. And that's the real test. Let's see how Double or Nothing goes and then go from there. And I think a lot of, do you agree with me in saying that some people are hyping it a little too much? And I mean, I've seen this on social media. Some people are getting somewhat annoyed with All Elite Wrestling fans before it even gets started.
I mean, I think people are just getting excited about it because I feel like they have a lot of promise. You know, they have a pretty solid roster. You know, they've got a lot of big name guys, and whether it's Jericho, Hangman Page, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega. So that's encouraging. It's something that is going to be different because they're going to be committed to promoting the guys from the independent scene. You know, it's encouraging, but I also understand the other side of it. You know, they haven't had a single show yet. We don't know if they're going to have a TV deal.
I mean, we know they're going to have one. The question is with who? They're going to have a TV deal. The question is really where they're going to end up on TV. Everyone, I think, is assuming TBS or TNT, but until we see it announced, you can't assume that. And the other thing too is, you know, when are they going to announce it? Personally, I think they're not going to announce it until Double or Nothing is done. We're not going to know about a TV deal until after Double or Nothing. That's my personal opinion on that.
And that's part of the reason why I feel like people could be jumping the gun, because to think they're going to come right out of the gate and, you know, put WWE out of business, I think that's naive. Can they compete with WWE? I think they are. As long as they make the right moves, they'll be able to compete with WWE and be legitimate competition. People laughed when I said this several months ago, but it's the truth. We don't even know if they have a wrestling ring yet because we haven't seen it. Show me a wrestling ring with an AEW logo in it, and then I'll be like, okay, you have a wrestling ring. But we don't even know if they have that yet. So,
but they have the one from All In. That's their ring, isn't it?
Actually, did you know that and I heard this straight from Cody Rhodes in a recent interview. Did you know that in order to make enough money, I think, to pay the guys to do the over-budget Battle Royal, they actually had to sell parts of the ring?
Yes.
Or sell them off or something. So they don't have that. I don't think they have that ring. And not being naive, I understand they're going to have a wrestling ring. But it's just like, you know, let's calm down. Let's see what happens with Double or Nothing. Let's see what they can do with the every week TV deal. And then we'll start talking about competing with WWE. Are they forcing WWE to do certain things that they may not have done if the AEW wasn't around? I think so. Is that why we're seeing guys brought up from NXT quickly? It could be. It could be because of that. It could be because it's WrestleMania season. And it could be because there's been a decline in the ratings. But, you know, at the very least, it's making the wrestling industry fun again, which is ultimately best for the fans and best for the wrestlers.
Yeah, that definitely is. Personally, with the NXT guys, I mean, the four that they're bringing up, Aleister Black, Gargano, Ciampa, and Ricochet, are probably the four most deserving to come up to the main roster. So you already know, like, they should be there. Yeah. So, you know, again, this is why it's fun to have these conversations about All Elite Wrestling and what's going to happen, who's going to go, who's going to leave WWE, who's going to AEW. It's a fun time to be a wrestling fan, guys. I just personally wish that it wouldn't end up to be like this civil war kind of thing where, like, you have to choose WWE or AEW. Why can't we like both? They're not going to be on the same night like Nitro and Raw were back in the late 90s. So let's have fun. Let's watch Raw on Monday. Let's watch Dynamite Tuesday if that's what ends up happening. And then let's watch SmackDown on Friday and just enjoy good wrestling. You know, not everything that WWE does is great, but at the same time, I'm sure there's going to be things that AEW does that people are going to be frustrated about.
Yep.
So let us know in the comments, do you think All Elite Wrestling is forcing WWE to change? If you like any of the points that we made in this video, like this video, share it all over social media, and subscribe. Make sure you hit that bell for notifications too. We're trying to hit 5,000 YouTube subscribers before All Elite Wrestling Double or Nothing. For my brother via Skype, Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti, and thanks for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.